Good morning. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you if you are scrappy. I think, personally, those of us from the mid-20th century, I will admit that's where I come from, we are scrappy. We had to be scrappy. We learned it early on. So if you don't know what it means, or if you don't feel scrappy, we're going to get some scrappy in front of you today. This is Yvonne DiVita, Smart Woman Conversations, and this is my special guest, Nettie Reynolds, she's a media and publicity owner. She has her own firm. She's had it for, wow, close to 15 years, maybe more than 15 years. I don't know. We seem to go back 15 years, and you had it then, Nettie.
Yeah.
She's a former tech journalist, which I'm really in awe of that, because I did a little bit of tech writing, but it was a really little bit, Nettie, way back in the day. Now, here's the key point, everyone. At 45, she followed her dream to become an interfaith hospital chaplain. And that's one of the things that got us back in touch. And I said, Nettie, you have to be on my show. Nettie, welcome to Smart Woman Conversations on Nurturing Big Ideas Today.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad to be with you. And it's been a long journey and very fruitful.
Well, that's good. Very fruitful. I like that. It's another really good word. And so, within the realm of the 21st century now, we baby boomers especially are becoming different people, so to speak. And the reality is we're not different people. We're just looking at things differently than we did, because from my perspective and some of the women I talked to, there's like this path in front of us that doesn't have the work, job, or career we had a couple of years ago, and it doesn't have the children taking up our time, as we spent 20 years raising these amazing children, and the path is like, what do I do on this path? How did you decide at 45 to take that different, to go that other way?
It's something I wanted to be a hospital interfaith chaplain since I was about 13. And so I think I was the only kid in fourth grade that wrote a book report on death and dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which I got in. None of the other kids knew who that was. So it's something I always wanted to do.
Where did you find it? How did you even know about it at that age?
I had actually met my grandpa's chaplain, and that chaplain in the hospital played checkers with my grandpa, and they told stories. And I thought, wow, that's really, really neat. One of the misnomers about what chaplains do is that we're tied to any fundamental traditional religion foundation. What we're really tied to is what the patient presents in terms of their needs, and whether they're spiritual, identify spiritual, non-religious, or religious. We help serve them. And so we have good conversations in terms of their lives and what they feel might be left undone, or what they want to make sure happens before the end of their lives. And, at 45, I decided I'm going to do this. I went through a divorce and transitioned a family of 3 and became a single mom. And I decided, well, I'm going to take my kids to seminary. And I lived on the campus in Austin. And told my kids I would pay for their therapy if the worst thing they ever said was practice to seminary, and started my journey. And, I think especially in midlife, life should be a verb, not a noun.
Yeah, for sure.
So I really like to make my life a verb, because life is finite. And so it means to really take confidence and power in your abilities and what your heart calls you to, what matters most to you in your life. You can make happen. You can be really scrappy. And I've always been scrappy. And you can make it happen. You can make it happen.
It's interesting that, excuse me, that you feel you've always been scrappy, that you remember being scrappy. I remember that also. And I wonder if sometimes we don't lose a little bit of that in the journey of whatever happens to us. Many of the women that I hope will watch the show and learn from you, they were scrappy as children, but they became this image of what society wanted them to be in whatever role they happened to have.
Yeah.
Excuse me, my throat is a little dry. Oh, a sip of coffee. But within that, though, I mean, here you were at 45. Even scrappy. I mean, to take 2 children to a seminary. I assume you did not have to pay for therapy. It probably was a good experience.
They had a good experience.
What was it like? I mean, with your past experience then as a media and publicity professional, as a tech journalist, as all the things that you were, where did that fit, or did you leave it all behind?
You know, I kept some of it. I was actually still teaching some people how to use Twitter the first year I was in seminary, because back in the day, you know, clients really need to learn how to use Twitter. Now it's so ubiquitous. I wouldn't even tell people you have to get on Twitter, but it's a through line in terms of with my clients. The thing I was really expert at was listening and helping them move forward in their lives, and helping them be brave, and helping them understand the different things that they had to do to make their book a real success, to become, you know, leading speakers. And so for me, being at the seminary, I got to be more quiet, and I got to really have, I went to a very progressive seminary. It's in the top 25 of seminaries that changed the world. And I got to be exposed to all different kinds of ideas, which is very similar to when you're a journalist and when you're a publicist. You're constantly exposed and innovated by what everyone else is doing. You have to constantly watch the news and look for the shifts and the changes. And so in a way, being a chaplain, being in seminary is the same thing. You're just looking for shifts and changes in a person's heart, in their mind, and their lives. And then your mind changes. You know, in England, they have the mind the gap. So you're minding those gaps, and you're caring for them, and you're minding your own in terms of where you want to be. How are you going to get there?
So I heard the word story, and we talk about story a lot at Nurturing Big Ideas, because 2 things that I say is you have to tell the story of you, and not the story of this person who went to here and got this award. It's a story of you. How did you feel that day? Also, I try to teach people to read poetry, because I think life is poetry. And if we can read and listen to the sound of the poetry and the way that it describes things, then it really can enhance the creativity in someone's brain. But back to the story, you said you were a good listener, so you must hear a lot of really good stories.
I do.
And I worry, as I know several or a number of other people do, that we're leaving behind the stories and not writing down the stories of the people maybe that you serve, who we will grieve over or mourn over. And then I wish I had asked them this.
Well, you know, what's interesting, the stories that I hear, of course, are confidential, but stories that people tell overall are very similar in that they're stories of love or not love, not loving enough, or loving so much that they don't want to leave. And I think part of our story also lives on through the people that we loved. And so, you know, I've never had someone tell me, for instance, what political party they're a part of when I sit down at their bedside. That really rarely comes up. It's more in regard to, did I do what I wanted to with my life? I wish I would have retired a year sooner. I wish I would have launched that business that I thought of when I was 50, but I had a plan and I was going to stick to that plan. I wish I'd seen my children more. You know, those kind of things. are more important in the stories. And I think there's a real value. One of the things that we do as chaplains is we encourage people to do a thing called life review, and encourage people to journal and write about their experiences, because journaling, that tactology, the kinesthesiology of writing something with a pen to paper is really vital. It's a different feeling, and it actually sends different signals to your brain. I'm not a scientist, but it sends different signals than typing does. And so one of the things that I do every year is I pick something to handwrite. And so I used to always handwrite. I don't know, there's several years where I hand wrote on yellow legal pads, Somerset Mom's Razor's Edge, the Razor's Edge book. And I've done this last summer I picked playwriting, and I hand wrote Barry Child, Sam Shepard's play, because I'm working on some plays right now. And it's a different feeling when you can almost feel in your hand the writer telling the story. So I think stories are vital, and I think that they should be captured. I always ask families, when your mom's telling a story, you might want to write it down, so that, or just little glimmers of it, so that generations to come, they'll have that memory of your mom and that story
Right.
telling when she was 4 and was on a swing in her front porch in Kentucky or wherever it may be. Those are vital.
It's so true, because the stories that families have to tell, in their own way, they're unique, but they're also part of the human experience. And the thing that's going to stick in my brain might not be the thing that sticks in my sister's brain or my brother's brain, and we don't remember things exactly the same, which I wrote about recently, because memory is such a strange undiscovered thing in our brains. But I remember, the thing that I remember most is that when my mother was, I think, 14, my dad was 15, and he used to ride his bike, I don't know how many miles, but I mean, from one particular town to her town to see her, because he just was already so much in love with her. And you think, who would do that today? Who would ride their bike 15 miles or however far? It was
They
pretty.
might ride a scooter.
Yeah, because he didn't have a car, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's something you can tell your grandkids.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And stories are important in what we tell ourselves, too, because at any time you can change the trajectory of your life.
Right.
Put your story into action. It's not talking about it. You have to be scrappy and find the through way to do it. What I found is that people want to help each other actualize their stories. And so I went to the seminary. I was sure in that admissions office that they would laugh at me, because I identify as spiritual, really not religious. And they didn't. They were welcoming. They were excited. They knew the power of the call, of that deepest peace in our heart that tells us, go a little bit more forward. There's something else that you can do. And I think the greatest thing that I've had the joy of seeing in my work is people that made that step, heeded that call, and no matter what society was reflecting to them or what they had done professionally, they leaned into that call and they created a new story. And we can do that at any time in our lives.
Lean in. I really Sheryl Sandberg said that in her book to women, to lean in. But I think if we as human beings can, open ourselves to that message, it isn't really even a message. It's just that story inside of you that says, here's something you can try, and then not be afraid. So that's one of the things that, even though you were scrappy, how afraid were you to take the step? If you took it, you accomplished it, but was there fear in it, or was there just
there was great fear and anxiety. And I'm actually, you know, in some ways I'm an introvert. I think I'm called an ambivert, where I'm introvert and extrovert, but
Huh.
have like low level anxiety and fear that I kind of tend to. I always, I use a trick. I call it Sweet Florence. And when it gets too high and too much talking in my mind, I'll just tell it to simmer down. It's going to be okay. I hear you. And now we're going to keep going, because I think that fear can be paralyzing. And so you have to manage it. I do a lot of mindfulness, and I do a lot of really concentrated effort when I start feeling it get heightened. But it's a hard journey. And I think it's part of life to have that fear, because I think it can propel you. You can move forward. You know, you can move forward in fear, and you can understand and accept that's part of it. I don't know anyone who started a new venture. I remember when I left Sif Davis, and at the height of the, you know, PC World and the Indian Standard and all those publications that I wrote for, because I need to, you know, do something more stable. And so I had a couple of corporations that I was working for and writing case studies, and they said, we'll give you more work, you know, but you got to go into the marketing side, which was, at the time as a journalist, that's the dark side. You don't want to go there. But those were stories too. It ended up that those case studies and those success stories were stories. They were stories of real human beings who had done something to quantify the data that was presented. And so everything I've done is based around story. And I think that, you know, getting to rest and hear other people's stories is just the best thing ever. Getting to witness other people's stories and bear their stories with them. Chaplains come alongside people wherever they are, and it's our job to, you know, listen, be a sacred handholder, pay attention to the stories that people tell over and over again, and see where they're stuck or what is happening at that level. And I think that, you know, I love what you're doing, because we need a community where we're supporting each other, and where we know stories turn out well if we take action.
So I wonder if, so what I'm doing again is the women that I'm hoping will watch all of the videos, but the women that I'm trying to reach out to, really what I'm hoping is that if you can't tell your story, you can talk to Nettie or you can talk to me, because I mean, sometimes that's the hard part, is the story's there, but they can't get it out because no one had ever asked them about, why do you do this, that, or the other thing, or what's in your heart today, you know, what are your memories? So that's what I really hope will come out of these videos. And when you are in your chaplain role, how does that work? So do you get called, we need the chaplain, or are you there? Or
you know, sometimes you get called, and then you have regular patients, and you're part of the team. I did a clinical residency just like a doctor or a nurse or a social worker would. And you know, you are part of that clinical team, and you get called to help family, you get called to sit with the patient. You know, it's kind of surprising how much people leave unsaid in their lives. And when you finally understand the finite gift of life, you want to talk more, you want to say things, you want to express your story. And that's why I think, you know, if you think of life as a verb, not a noun, then you take more action, because the stories you want to tell at the end are ones of joy and feeling loved and doing everything that you really wanted to do. And you know, it's way beyond the bucket list things. It's hey, I wanted to have a garden that was full of bluebonnets. I'd never done that, so I determined for this 1 acre of my land I was going to do that. Or, I went back, I went back to college and I became a doctor. I went back at 50 and became a teacher. I launched my own app at 60, and it helped countless people find reduced prices for drugs. So, those are the kind of things that even as a chaplain you hear. And those are things that matter most. There was a great book that I read, and I still go back and read it. It's by James Hollis, and it was called What Matters Most. And it has to do with midlife and with really kind of determining what things matter most. And I think the interior reflection of yourself should match as much as it can to the exterior action that you're taking. And
awesome.
Often we're really looking at the outside reflection, the way we think we're reflected in society, or the way society wants us to be, and that we presume society is not, I think it's society's so busy, it doesn't really want us to be anything. It's kind of a bait and switch for us to think that. It really doesn't have time. It's moving all the time. And, one of the things that I tell people when they're in grief is that, their movie has changed to a black and white movie, and even becomes a silent movie. And society is a color movie, and we're comfortable with quiet, and we're comfortable with black and white movies. We like color and all the special effects. And so sometimes your family and friends, for them to work well in their color movie, they have to play the same role. And when you
that's really pretty profound. I really have never thought of it that way, but I do think that society and even family, your community. I really believe in the idea of neighborhood. So neighborhood is a little bit closer knit than a big community, which we all belong to. But you can get caught up in that, and you can not. So I do think that would it be your, I don't want to say recommendation, but would it be your thought that it doesn't hurt to maybe take at least a weekly 20 minutes of just introspection and quiet and thinking about your life and where you fit in the universe? Is that,
I think that's a great suggestion. And, I tell people, if you can't write your story, or you don't want to type your story, use your phone, and while you're around, put your voice memo on and start talking. I used to ghostwrite, help authors write their books, and that was one of the things I would say. If you'll just tape stuff and then send it to me while you're driving around in your car, I can make sense of it. And so it's not really about what utility you use. It's more about letting that deepest part of us know that we're paying attention.
I think that we tend not to do that because we feel like we're being selfish. And it isn't selfish. It's necessary.
No, it's necessary, because the more you are in your life, the more that you are actualized, the more you can raise your community and your loved ones and your family and friends, because you're doing what you want to do. And whether that's, being a teacher, being an accountant, being a plumber, every single person, if they strive to take what they have, and we have great privilege, really, to have choices, we need to use them wisely and use them up. Irma Bombeck, who's one of my heroes, she said, she was asked, what are you going to say when you get to heaven? And she said, I'm going to tell God I used up every gift you gave me.
Right.
And
I remember her saying that. Yep.
Use up every gift you're given.
Yep. Yeah, and I feel that it's one of the things I feel responsible for is helping women understand that concept and recognize that they do have gifts. There's so many. I meet so many women that are like, well, you know, I'm nothing. I'm nobody. No, 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 no. Those words must never, ever come out of your mouth again. Because
Yeah.
let's talk about what you've accomplished in your life. Well, I've never done anything. Well, yes, you have. You raised 4 kids. You went to PTA. You took them on field trips. You took care of a house. You invited people over. All the things that they don't
Build community. You put good children into the world to then further our community.
Yep. And they're just like,
Educated.
oh, no. So sometimes you have to nurse it out of them a little bit. Well, we're getting to the end of our talk here, Nettie, but you know, I really have one more question for you. So as your role, in your role as chaplain, where, I mean, we talk spiritual. You said the word spiritual. I feel spiritual. I'm not necessarily religious. Some family members are, and they pray for me. God bless them. But when you're with these families, again, you said, well, politics doesn't come up. Does religion come up? How much of the we're helping our loved one transition to another place? Is that part of what you do?
It does come up. And again, it's really driven by the patient. So in a patient's families, there can be different religious values and beliefs, but it's really, really driven by the patient. And so, for instance, if I have a Catholic patient, I want to really make sure that I find a priest to do anointing for them. If I have a Buddhist patient, I want to make sure that we talk about how the Buddhists bless the body when the loved one has passed. So, you know, it's really an interesting dynamic to see the ritual and the deep religious foundation that people have. And I have a deep, you know, foundation in my belief system. And I think that there is benevolent, you know, abundance of benevolence that we all go back to. And so I try to practice that in my life. I try to do no harm. And, you know, the Buddhists say, may all beings be free of suffering. And I think that in each family, there's different components. Sometimes we call that family dynamics, where people believe in a different way, but it's really, what does the patient need? What does the patient believe? And then also helping that family in their own understanding of their religion to come to a place of peace and letting go, and a place that is, you know, hopefully of forgiveness and hopefully of healing, as their story, their, you know, movie will continue beyond their loved one.
I appreciate that so much. I think that we as a society, and when I say we, I mean everybody the world over, I don't know that much about a lot of religions. I was brought up Catholic. I don't practice it, but you know, I do feel that when we get to that place where maybe the end is coming, you know, there's this sense of what's next. And for those of us left behind, what's next is this grief that we must endure. So in grief counseling, Nettie, what advice do you give people to help them through it? You know, some people just bury it. And I don't know if that's a good thing, but what is your, just a little bit of advice about that?
I think find community. Don't stay in the house. Express your grief. Find someone that you can call in the middle of the night and they know they can't fix it, and they'll just listen for 5 minutes to you crying. I think that's so important. And to understand that, you know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the stages of grief, those were never meant to be understood in a linear fashion. And I think it's meaning making. It's weaving the person's life into a new story of your life after that person. So in the old days, they would say, well, just put it away, just stop it, stop thinking about it. Now we know the rituals and the beautiful things we can do to keep that person's memory and love still there are very important to us being able to grieve and to us being able to go back to our lives in a good fashion without anything compartmentalized. And I would also say Cry a lot. The body produces good endorphins when you cry that are the same ones as when you laugh. So a lot of times scrappy women in particular, we kind of have a thing of not crying. And I just always encourage people to cry because your body needs it. And it's hormones when you cry.
Wow. Well,
And
thank
we all
you
need
so
hormones.
Yeah, it's not our mother's fault, it's our hormones. Well, Nettie, this has been really fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I will definitely be in touch so we can do it again and do a follow-up and talk a little bit more about some of the other things that you're doing. So for my listeners and my viewers, I will have all Nettie's information on the blog post. You can find her at Nettie Reynolds on LinkedIn, and I will share again other places and things and her social connections. But for today, this is Yvonne DiVita, Smart Woman Conversations, and Nettie, we will be in touch.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.